Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've had an opportunity to engage with friends, old and new, and engage in some meaningful conversations on the topics that our distinguished speakers have discussed so far. For this next segment, we have something very exciting in store for all of you. Our two speakers will be engaging on a debate on whether or not Malaysia's carbon market should be guided by market forces instead of regulation. So just in case you're wondering, we actually did have some female speakers on this panel, but unfortunately couldn't travel to Malaysia in the last minute. But we trust that the gentlemen who are here will be providing sufficient diversity on the views, given that they're arguing for and against this very hot topic. I'd like now to invite our debate moderator, Augustine Antuvan, moderator at large here at EcoBusiness, onto the stage. And joining him are our speakers, Dr. Renat Siu, Group Head of Corporate Sustainability at Yinsen, and Timothy Collier, Head of Climate and Sustainability of the Asia Pacific, Oliver Wyman. Augustine, over to you.
So thank you, everybody. I did a quick count. I was standing at the back and did a head count. I believe there are close to 70 people in the room. So you know what's your first job? You have to scan the QR code. I see it on my screen in front of me. By the way, debaters, you should also scan the QR code and you can, moderator will remain neutral. So can I see all of you taking your phones out? I'm serious. It's time to earn your lunch. I want to see, when moderator says, I want to see 70 in the top right-hand corner. Boleh? 70, yeah? Sir, you're not holding your phone, so can you please take out your phone right now? I'm looking at the table. I won't mention who you are. Sir, take out your phone. All right? Please, all of you. I have a very strict timing, but this part is important. We need to get the ground sensing, and then I will go through the format of the debate, go through the rules. It's a very strict timing. There's a huge clock in front of me. And then speakers, I will be doing this. That's the first cue for 1 minute left. That's 30 seconds. And then please don't make me break my glass. So far I had a tradition of keeping my glass that was given to me. My dear friends, it's a nice number, 51, right? And it's growing, but I will wait till I get 70. For the senior gentlemen, senior people in the room, if you're not too sure how to, let's not be shy. If you are really not too sure how to do this thing, then again, it could be a senior person teaching the young one how to use the phone. Get my drift? Ma'am, I've not seen you take out your phone, ma'am. Seriously, you've been hiding, your hands have been under the table for quite long. So please take out your phone and scan it. I don't think there's any other telepathic way of doing the vote. So you need to take out the phone, scan, and make your choice. All right, on a more serious note, please vote whether you think Malaysia's carbon market should be guided by market forces instead of regulation. This is the pre-debate vote, and we will come back to this same slide at the end of the debate. So this is a high intensive afternoon session, and it'll also be a very intensive session because we have allocated precisely 9 minutes for audience to participate. And I just need to check with my wonderful production team at the back. Gentlemen, do we have roving microphones for the audience? Can I get a visual confirmation? Because roving mics, ada? Okay, terima kasih. So one or two roving mics, but we will take your questions, and the rule is your question cannot be longer than 15 seconds. Hint, hint. So please keep your questions sharp, but your questions can be tough. They can be provocative. And as far as possible, please keep the conversation to the Malaysian context. So thank you so much. My dream has come true. We have crossed the 70 mark. You see that? So beautiful, right? So give yourselves a round of applause. So once again, I want to start the session by very quickly reading a very important rule. We are invoking the Chatham House rule with respect to both speakers. They have not only have they asked for it, but that's the tradition in the debate format. The Chatham House rule, for those of you who are not familiar, is actually named after a Chatham House in the UK. And I'm going to read the rule to all of you. when a meeting, and in this case, when a debate is held under the Chatham House rule, participants, that's you, are free to use the information received, but neither the identity nor the affiliation of the speakers nor that of any other participant may be revealed. Do I need to say that again? No. Okay. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the Chatham House rule, that rule applies with effect from now. All right. Next, I just want to read a short introduction on the very topic itself. So can I just also invite all of you to please actually use that wonderful eco-business notebook that you have in front of you, and do jot down the points that are being presented by both speakers, because one of the important things that we will need is for you to engage both speakers and to challenge them on the points that they are raising. So allow me to explain the format of the debate. Did you know that a debate is crucial because it plays a vital role in our society? And it encourages critical thinking, exposes the audience present, that's all of you, to diverse perspectives, and helps refine ideas on a set topic, which is today centering around Malaysia's carbon market. Is the debate solely about winning or losing? Well, I'm sure both gentlemen on either side want to win, right? But I would argue that the broader purpose most certainly extends beyond mere victory. Today, on this special eco-business coordinated conference, plenary debate, we will be discussing the motion. This House believes Malaysia's carbon market should be guided by market forces instead of regulation. And this platform will allow us to explore, to be informed, to be educated, to be entertained. I hope debaters, you will also entertain us. And finally, and most importantly, persuade all of us to arrive at the vote. The vote right now for the motion stands at 44%, which means there are a good number of you who believe, 44% of you believe, and you stay on the side of the motion. Against the motion is the 56%, and please continue voting because the production team will close this vote at the end of my opening remarks. So I say again, you think Malaysia's carbon market should be guided by market forces? That's for the motion. Remember, Malaysia's carbon market should be guided by market forces, and the gentleman on my right, Tim, will be taking that position. Am I right, sir? I hope you're in the right seat. Yeah, he's in the right seat. I'm just joking. And the gentleman on my left is saying it should be regulation. Right now, the House has decided. And so there's a huge clock in front of me, and having set the initial ground rules, Tim, the floor is yours. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Okay, thank you. And I understand, Augustine, we're going to do this in 3 parts, right? So I'm going to.
That's right.
Okay, good. So good to know. I need to persuade, I think, about 5 people in order to swing this vote. So I'm going to try and do that whilst losing nobody in the debate. I'm going to do this, my argument as well, in 3 parts. So I want to argue, first of all, that we need a carbon credit market that is flexible and evolving in order to properly direct capital to the right places. And that argues for market forces rather than regulation. I'm secondly going to argue that regulators will inevitably do a bad job of regulating carbon credit markets, and that's a good reason not to have it regulated. And then I'm thirdly going to argue that we shouldn't have a carbon credit market at all because trading carbon credits is not what we need. So those are going to be my 3 arguments, and I pre-warn my friend and colleague here to how he wants to respond to those. So on the first one, so my day job is advising companies on how to address sustainability, but I also work for a professional services company that emits carbon, and I work for a company that has a carbon neutrality and a net zero commitment. Our emissions come from flying around the world to see clients and to do our project work, and we estimate that in Asia Pacific we're responsible for about 2,000 tons of CO2 per year. So we can address that either by not flying, that would be very expensive for our business, or we can address it by buying things that will offset and have a positive effect on carbon emissions elsewhere. Clearly for us, the latter is a better option, and we want to make sure that that money goes to the right places. So I represent really the buy side in this equation today as well. Now, as we think about where that money goes, we want to make sure it has the maximum effect. So a few years ago, that would have meant all I can really do is I can invest in tree planting or I can invest in forest preservation. But today, I might invest in sustainable aviation fuel. I might invest in supporting the kind of renewable energy efforts by putting equity into places. I am even now, there's discussion about carbon credits being used to fund the managed phase-out of coal-fired power plants. So where that money can be best used is a fast-evolving picture. All of these things are constantly changing, and the economics of where grant money is needed versus where it's not needed because the economics already work in favor of those technologies is also constantly evolving. So if I set a standard today, it's going to be out of date in a year, it's going to be out of date in 2 years, that money's going to be going to the wrong places and it won't be going to the right places. And the only way we can address that is through market forces rather than a slow-moving regulated market.
Perfect timing. Anyway, you have the giant clock in front of us, so that helps a lot. Thank you, Tim, for laying the groundwork and to present some forceful arguments. We'll see how the conversation goes, but let's go straight to the speaker against the motion. Renat, you have the floor. 3 minutes is yours.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here to be able to debate the future of our carbon markets. We have seen from the Bursa Carbon Exchange, at least in the last 2 auctions, the signal has been extremely weak. In fact, the more recent auction, we only had 2 publicly listed companies that participated out of 15 in order to support this carbon markets, which is why I'm all the more convinced that we really need to be guided by regulation instead of market forces. And there are 3 arguments that I'd like to put forth in order to support my stand. My first argument is really centered around the environmental integrity of carbon credits. I'm very sure all of you here in this room today have heard about the famous Guardian article that was published on the 18th of January. So Guardian, Leipzig source material, a not-for-profit investigative journalism think tank, launched a 9-month study into the efficacy and the impact of various carbon credits. And they found that 90% of nature-based or rainforest credits were what is known as phantom credits. In other words, they actually did not achieve the intended consequence of actually mitigating carbon. Needless to say, the Kariba scandal was another project that surfaced almost immediately after that, where 23 million carbon credits were actually sold off and traded, only to find that 50% of them were actually, once again, phantom credits, and Vera had actually suspended any issuance of credits after that. So you can clearly see that in an unregulated market, there is just an opportunity for a lot of this, bogus phantom credits to continue flooding the market, further undermining the trust and efficacy of our carbon markets. Now, this leads me into my second argument that I'd like to put forth regarding the inadequacy of market forces. Market forces alone cannot guarantee accountability and transparency. These are 2 very important keywords that will help shape, actually, the course of today's debate. Now, when it comes to accountability, when something goes wrong, who takes liability? Who should be held responsible? In an unregulated market, there is simply no response to this. What about transparency, the whole process from the registration of carbon credits all the way down to verification? Without regulation, the reality is that there's no way for us to ensure that the monitoring, verification, reporting processes are actually have integrity and are actually transparent. Unregulated markets can lead to an oversight. It can open up doors to fraudulent activities, double counting, and also misreporting of carbon emissions. So you could be a corporate that has set what we call carbon neutral goals, go out into the market, pursue 1 million credits, only to find that half of them perhaps were actually phantom credits or bogus. Without regulation, this is problematic. Let's not gamble the future of our carbon markets because climate crisis is an issue that we need to resolve now.
All right. You noticed the microphone actually went down. So we have strict instructions with my production team. Fader goes down. Well said. I'm now going to introduce the true element of debate. Both speakers were briefed on this. Before you go into the next part of your key messages, Tim, in the tradition of debate is a rejoinder. I would like to give you now 30 seconds on the clock to demolish the argument that Renard has mentioned that there's a slow take-up in the markets. 15 companies, did I hear you right? That's right. The floor is yours.
Okay, so is my microphone back
Yes,
on? Okay, good.
Don't worry, I'll add 3 seconds. All right.
So this is fine. So Renard has given me a very nice segue into my next section because he has inevitably come up with the convincing argument that the current voluntary carbon markets are rubbish. And it's pretty hard to argue about because they are rubbish. What I'm going to argue next is that if they're regulated, they won't be any better. So the regulation is not going to solve the problem of...
All right. We were supposed to give him 3 more seconds on the clock. So, very good rejoinder. Thank you, Tim, for being a good sport. And my production team is seriously managing the time. You really took my recommendation on bringing the fader down. But well said, well said. So let's remind everybody in the House, speakers obviously know their positions, that the House believes Malaysian carbon market should be guided by market forces. Am I right, Tim? Yeah. And on my left, for those of you who just joined in the conversation, Renard is arguing, no, let's have state intervention. Am I right? Regulations need to set the tone. So, my friend, you're on my left. Now you know why I sit between the two speakers, because they start to look at each other. So there's this invisible line between the for and against the motion. You have 30 seconds. Can we set the clock to 30 seconds? Rejoinder to what Tim just said. The floor is yours.
Okay, I guess it starts
checking.
Starts now. Yeah, so I disagree with some of Tim's views that regulation does a bad job. In fact, I would sort of reinforce and say that regulation is very much needed because it really, if anything, it helps to spur stability and predictability. Immediately after the Guardian article, was released, on the 18th of January, we had seen carbon prices plummeting almost drastically by more than 70 to 80%. Down to about USD 120, for nature-based projects. So this raises a lot of questions about corporates.
You made your point. Thank you, Bernard. Let's keep to the time. All right, gentlemen. Before we go to the next part, we did have some prearranged talking points, but just to bring the entire House onto the same page. And I sincerely hope if you're looking at your phone, you are typing the questions, right? But we're not typing questions for this debate. We're going to take questions from the floor. World Bank to cite a quote from them. And the reason I'm pulling out the World Bank is somewhere in this debate, both speakers will have to address Article 6.2. Gentlemen, I hope you did your homework on the Article 6.2. If you didn't, swing it, all right? But let's revisit carbon markets. It's a very important tool to reach global climate goals, including Malaysia's climate goals, particularly in the short to medium term. So the speakers know the clock is ticking. Literally, the clock is ticking across Peninsular Malaysia and in East Malaysia, Sabah and Sarawak. The carbon markets mobilize resources and reduce costs to give countries and companies the space to smooth the low carbon transition and be able to achieve the goal of net zero emissions in the most effective way possible. Carbon markets incentivize climate action by enabling parties to trade carbon credits generated by the reduction or removal of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, such as by switching from fossil fuels to renewable energy or enhancing or conserving carbon stocks in the ecosystems, such as a forest, which Malaysia has a lot of. It is estimated that trading in carbon credits could reduce the cost of implementing the country's nationally determined contributions, which are otherwise known as NDCs, by more than half. But at the end of the day, today's motion also has to translate to communicating effectively to the larger population in Malaysia, to resetting the clock back to 3 minutes again for the motion. The floor is yours, Tim, to take it in any direction you prefer, but do use this 3 minutes to also educate, persuade the House that's in front of you.
Okay, thank you. So I agree with the Article 6.2. It is critical that we get money into the net zero transition, and that money, and that grant money, which is effectively what companies like mine on the buy side are willing to spend, is efficiently allocated. The second part of the argument I want to make is that regulators will do a bad job at this. And part of the reason that we can see this is that regulators and standard setters today are already doing a bad job. They have very limited standards for where carbon credits can be spent. The groups that are certifying carbon credits are themselves responsible for certifying a whole series of phantom projects as well. And they're not helping for money that could be used to accelerate the transition.
No, carry on.
You're a bit hasty there. Be used for accelerating the adoptions of new technology. That money is not getting there via the existing carbon credit market. So regulators are just not nimble enough to regulate effectively the transmission of capital. What we need is, and having regulation creates a crutch for buy side to not think carefully about where that money is going. If they have to do their own assessment and work out, am I really, with what I'm doing this year, offsetting my own carbon? They have to think harder, and they will be more critical of the projects that they will then be investing in. The other issue that a regulator will have when they're trying to create a carbon credit market is that that process will inevitably be one of compromise. They'll need to think about where are the carbon credits coming from, which companies want to be offsetting what, who is this coming through, and they will aim for the lowest common denominator, or they'll aim for a low denominator which satisfies more groups. That's not going to be good enough for more ambitious companies, and it's going to limit the ambition of what we can do with the carbon credits market. So we do need this money to be going to the right places. Existing regulation is sending it to the wrong places. The existing voluntary carbon markets are also sending it to the wrong places at the moment. And what we need is to move away from the concept that we can have a standard through time definition of what is offsetting carbon, and to have the buy side think much more carefully about where they are putting their money, what is that really achieving, and to be willing to take a bit of risk without needing the crutch of regulation to fall back on.
Well done, Tim. And it's good. Speakers, remember, you don't have to hit the full 3-minute mark and then have that, unfortunate situation of your microphones going down. Because I know you're passionate now. You can see the passion is building up. So, Renard, you have the opportunity, of course, in this first round for the rejoinder. Regulators are doing a bad job. Groups that are out there certifying these projects, he has labeled them as phantom projects, all right? And there's one view that if you do have regulations, perhaps even the markets and the companies could be underperforming, because companies could perhaps even rise above that if they didn't have a certain ceiling or certain numbers to aspire to. The floor is yours. Renard, 3 minutes is yours.
No, I think those were very interesting points. But then going back to one of the observations that I had with the weak signals that we've been seeing in the Bursa Carbon Exchange, it's quite clear to me that one of the reasons for a lack of participation, and once again, this is anecdotal evidence through my involvement with the CEO Action Network and asking companies why aren't they participating. One of the key questions that they had is why should they be purchasing credits to begin with if there is no stake to force them to do it? Why should they be involved in this? So some companies don't even have a carbon neutral or a net zero target as of yet. So this is where I think regulation really needs to kick in to make sure that corporates are in some ways has some sort of incentive to participate in this. And of course, when we talk about regulation, it really comes from two perspectives, right? Some of the mechanisms that we talk about is, for example, the carbon tax, which Singapore has carried out. In Malaysia, we do not have something to this scale as of yet. So there's really no reason for corporations here in Malaysia, right, to participate unless if they want to look good, in which, NGO bodies could easily interpret that as a simple act of greenwashing. simply just saying, oh yeah, we're buying credits for the sake of buying it, but for what reason, for what purpose? So I think it's so important, right, for regulation to really kick in on this trend. Now, another area, I guess, around the reason why, there is a lack of hesitance among corporates, it's also the fact that there are quite a number of uncertainties. And once again, it goes back to my earlier argument around the environmental integrity of these credits. How do we really ensure that the credits that are being traded on our carbon markets, right, are transparent, that they actually achieve the impacts that they were set out to? Without this, there simply is a lack of confidence. I'm sure a lot of you here in the room, financiers, bankers, investors, corporates, want to invest, right, in a market that is transparent and that is credible. Once again, an unregulated market doesn't give you that. An unregulated market opens up a can of worms to fraudulent activities, double reporting. It goes against all the principles of what makes carbon markets, an integral place with full levels of transparency. And because of this, I'm all the more convinced that we must have regulation in place to guide our carbon markets. We have given market forces an opportunity through the past 2 auctions and another one upcoming tomorrow in BCX. And the signal, once again, as I've mentioned earlier, has been weak. So it's high time that we change this and we make regulation integral to this process. Because at the very least, this would really help restore confidence among all of our stakeholders.
Thank you so much, Reinhard, for keeping to time. We're into our third round of 3-minuters. Tim, you have the floor to take the House home on some of the key messages you believe will support and convince the people in front of you that Malaysia's carbon market should be guided by market forces. 3 minutes on the clock.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm back on, good. So Renard makes a good point here, which is the current carbon markets have a weak signal demand. And I think I hear him arguing that there should be regulation requiring companies to be aiming for net zero and offsetting their emissions. So I think I can agree on the second half of that, but I don't think what we're arguing about.
Keep going.
But I don't think that's really what we're arguing about today. The debate today is about the carbon credits themselves that are bought. Okay. Should those be regulated, yes or no? So I have argued already we need flexible changing carbon credits in order to make sure that grant money, which is what carbon credits is going to the right technologies to be transitioning fastest. I've argued that we cannot achieve that with regulation because regulation is too slow, it's too inflexible, but it has a poor history of delivering high-quality carbon credits, and that it will compromise to too low a standard. And I want to make a final point, which is, because we're sat here in the Securities Commission in Malaysia, that we shouldn't be aiming for a carbon market at all. Because a carbon market says, I need a tradable asset class, which is bought and sold. And that is just a misunderstanding of what the role of carbon credits in decarbonisation is. Carbon credits is about moving grant money from people who want to be offsetting and achieving net zero towards the most efficient places to do that. Once they've got it, they don't want to sell the carbon credit. There are no sellers, there are no transactions. And as buy side, if there is a seller, what it means is that I'm going into the market one year saying, I want to offset next year's 2,000 tons of emissions from Oliver Wyman's flights. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy something that somebody else bought last year, but they decided that they no longer need, and so I'm going to take on something that has already been offset. That's not a carbon credit that I want. I want to be investing in something new. I want to be investing in something which is going to take additional CO2 out of the air, not just take on something which has already happened. And because of that, there's never going to be a big, vibrant, well-traded carbon credit market, and we shouldn't want one. What we should want is, exactly as Renard was arguing, more regulation to force companies or to encourage companies to be offsetting their emissions, which we can do through things like ISSB and additional shareholder pressure. And then we should want those companies to be finding the most efficient places in the particular time that they're doing the offsetting to be reducing emissions.
All right. Thank you so much. And some instructions from the team flashed on your screens, speakers. And so, very interesting arguments from my speaker on my right, questioning even the very need for carbon markets. Did I hear you right, Tim?
Great. Carbon
Yeah.
credits, yes. Carbon markets, no.
Yeah, very interesting. So he's really pushing all our boundaries and getting all of you out there to think about this very seriously. And you have the opportunity to tackle that and do a rejoinder, as well as make your key messages. Your time is yours, Reina.
You know, I think firstly, maybe let's go back to the motion tabled today, right? That this House believes that Malaysia's carbon market should be guided by market forces instead of regulation. I think it quite clearly signals that we are actually in agreement already in some ways that there is a need for carbon markets. It's just that whether it's guided by market forces or regulation. So let's be very clear on that point. Now, the arguments that I'd like to bring up to further substantiate my stand here really is the success that we have seen, right? Where carbon markets have been guided by legislation. I think, first and foremost, the EU emissions trading scheme, EU ETS that was established in 2005, it covers over more than 11,000 power stations, industrial plants, coal power plants in more than 30 countries that have been retired, thanks to this cap and trade, principle that the EU ETS has basically championed. So they have really been, a game changer, standing at the forefront of showing how regulation actually works. In fact, some of the evidence that we have seen is that the EU ETS has significantly reduced greenhouse gas emissions by up to 35% between the years 2005 to 2020. In fact, it has even spurred a lot of the new innovation and investments through this cap and trade system, where companies were incentivized to invest quite actively in low carbon technologies and improve on energy efficiency. Despite the fact that there might have been some minor issues with over allocation of some of the allowances, but this was very quickly corrected by regulation. And once again, there are tons of studies out there to further substantiate this. Of course, the California Cap and Trade Program is another successful example of how, regulation can guide carbon markets. So California's Cap and Trade Program, as you know, was launched in 2012. Any entities that emit above 25,000 metric tons of CO2 per year must participate in this market. And some of the statistics that came out of that is that California in itself is currently on track to meeting the emission goals that they have set by cutting down on emissions up to 1990 levels and achieving carbon neutrality by 2045. They are already on track. Of course, needless to say, there's also tons of other carbon markets that are guided by regulation, the New Zealand Emissions Trading Scheme being one of them, which covers all sectors of the economy, including forestry. And this has continued to play a pivotal role in actually driving New Zealand forward, right, in this scheme. And then, of course, there's also the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, RGGI, United States program that has successfully cut down, emissions in both Northeast and Mid-Atlantic programs by up to 50% since its inception. This really speaks to the efficacy of regulation in guiding our carbon markets.
Thank you so much, Renat. So can we give our speakers on both sides of the House a round of applause? Truly top of the mark professional debating, and thank you, gentlemen, for complying with your 3 minutes time limit. We've reached the point where it's crucial to involve the House, all of you in front of, and I saw the last count, 70 plus of you. The floor is open, and you can challenge either side. You can present a question to both speakers, or you can present a question to a particular speaker. And if one speaker has a chance to respond, as the moderator, I will give equal airtime to the other speaker. So can we take the first question, please, from the floor? I see the hand is up. I see the hand is up. And so I'll take this gentleman. I'll take that gentleman. And to maintain the gender balance, the next two will be women. Yes, it's affirmative action. Okay, go ahead, sir.
All right.
Yeah.
I actually agree with both speakers, but my first question, my point I'd like to make is if regulation was not in place, we'd all be smoking and drive here on leaded petrol and be genetically designed human species. So regulation is important. The second part of it is carbon markets being regulated. You can't play it on both sides, Tim, where you want markets and you don't want markets. Every market is regulated. Every disclosure is regulated in the financial markets. I come from a practice from forensic, which we used to call the financial statements of fiction or fertile fantasy, but nevertheless, so I'm actually questioning both sides to say, do you want a market or you don't want a market? If you don't want a market, then regulation is the answer.
All right,
if it's a
sir.
market, then
All right.
you need to regulate it.
No, but wonderful. And can we give a round of applause for the first audience participation? Nice, spicy. Since I heard the name Tim mentioned, 30 seconds, Tim, on the response. And then I'll take Renat in. Go ahead.
So maybe to clarify, I am in principle in favor of regulation in general. Right? I don't think we should live in a completely unregulated world. So we can all agree that we should agree which side of the road we should live on, we should drive on, etc. I just think that the regulation is not the answer when we're talking about directing money towards technological change, which is fast moving. Right? So that's the argument I'm making against regulation here, is it can't keep pace. Which side of the road we drive on, that doesn't really change from one year to the next. It's a good place to be setting regulation. Is smoking good for you? That doesn't really change from one year to the next either.
Thank you, Tim. Your 30 seconds are up. Good point. And Tim has, from this side of the house, has been consistently making this argument that where's the money going, right? To what sort of technologies are you banking on? Did I hear you right, Tim? Absolutely. So, Renat, response to the question on the floor, and of course, to a rejoinder to Tim's points. Your 30 seconds begins now.
Yeah, I think it's very important for us to bear in mind that carbon markets exist because they help climate financing. So the key question here is, where does the money go to, right? So some of the statistics that we're seeing is that, we have a huge gap when it comes to biodiversity financing. In fact, we need about 766 million, in the next year or so in order to close the gaps. Out of this, like 766 million, where is the money going to come from? I can tell you that currently 56% of any sort of financing for biodiversity restoration protection comes from the public sector. Only less than 1% is from the carbon markets.
All right.
So there is a lot of opportunity here for us to make a difference.
Thank you, Renat. You made your point. No, sir, the House rules remain the same. So the question goes over to the next. By the way, 15 seconds for your question. Go ahead, sir.
Well, how does transparency and integrity exactly look like then?
Could you say that again?
How does transparency and integrity in carbon markets look like then, ideally speaking?
What would the integrity look like then, all right?
In carbon markets.
Very good, sir. Thank you very much. And as the microphone returns back to the team, can I see the next question? There's a lady here in the front. We'll come to the lady here. 30 seconds, Tim.
So the question is, what does the transparency and integrity look like? In carbon credits, in the carbon markets? So integrity means those who are buying get a realistic view about what it is that they are offsetting and that they're putting money to the right places. Right? And that they are then reporting that and they're able to defend what they have. Right? And I think at the moment, exactly what that looks like is going to be changing all the time. And we need those people to be doing an honest view, and we need them to be held to account by the people that they're then reporting that to.
All right. So, we hear you. Regulations, yes, but it's not the be-all and the end-all of it, right? Am I hearing right, Tim? As we say in French, comme ci, comme ça. All right, so over to this side of the house, you have 30 seconds.
I think first and foremost, we need to have a national carbon registry. In Malaysia, we do not have that yet. So what that means is that so long as it's a free market, we're going to continue seeing, an uprising of projects, regardless of whether they're bogus, phantom, continue to flood our markets. And this is also where I think it's so important for regulation to step in, to make sure that there's no double counting, to ensure that all the principles of what makes a carbon market transparent and has full integrity are actually adhered to.
All right, thank you very much. So I'm glad you actually brought this up, that because Tim, in his earlier arguments, did talk about companies certifying phantom projects out there. And you also brought the need for a national carbon registry. We'll leave that at that, and we're rushing now into the home stretch. The floor is yours, ma'am, for a question.
Hi, I'm Grace from Honorable Carvin. I am with the House with Tim. So my question is for Renard. Don't you think that currently the regulators have done such a bad job with trying to regulate something because of the lack of collective intelligence and collective courage for something so global and so urgent? And wouldn't regulators mask the actual pricing of credits? And the whole traceability around sellers to buyers is all completely masked and fabricated because of regulation.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. 15 seconds is up. And so, Renard, I'm going to give this to you. You did mention California as a case in point where things are going right. Please attend to the question. 30 seconds is yours.
No, I think first and foremost, I wanted to bring us back to the motion today that we are really looking at Malaysia's carbon markets. And at this point in time, we simply do not have any regulation in place to regulate our carbon markets, which is the point that I'm trying to make, that we need this. It's not about whether regulators have done a bad job, because we have not seen it or experienced for ourselves. But what we do know is that our carbon markets currently guided by market forces just isn't working.
Right.
The two very examples that I gave was, you just look at the auction that has taken place, the past two auctions in BCX, you can see that the take-up rate has been extremely low.
All right, thank you very much. You'll hold it there. Tim, fair voice, 35 seconds. He took 5 seconds more.
Okay. So I think that my friend in the audience has made my case very nicely here. The regulators are working. I don't think you were making that comment only about Malaysian regulation, because obviously we don't have Malaysian regulation. In general, where we have regulated carbon markets, they also don't work because regulators are doing a bad job. Standard setters, certifiers are all doing a bad job. There's no reason to think that regulation is going to solve this problem.
Thank you. Well said. And final question, could I get a lady in the house, please? Thank you. Go ahead, ma'am. Microphone to the lady.
Hi, Audrey from PBB. So the EU is trading 65 euros per ton of carbon, New Zealand 53 New Zealand dollars per ton of carbon, voluntary $1 per ton of carbon. So my question is to Tim, do you think this $1 voluntary market sufficient to fund the project?
30 seconds, Tim.
So $1 is not the correct price for carbon. It's not the price that we're setting when we offset either. And I think if you were looking carefully at where you could put grant money to reduce carbon, you wouldn't arrive at $1 being the right price, which is how I get to my third argument, which is we shouldn't really have a market. We should have a way of directing grant money to the right places. Yeah, that probably answers that.
All right.
Question.
No, it's fine. Thank you. And you know, it's not easy playing the role of the moderator, because very often I want to nod my head and I have to hold back because I can't take any sort of position. So if you see me nodding, it's just, yes, I'm listening to you. Yes, I'm listening to you. But can I just say here, we have exceeded our time allocation, but I am going to give Renard right of reply. 30 seconds over to you.
No, for me, I think it really goes back to my point earlier that regulation ensures that there's stability and predictability. You know, even when it comes to price discovery of what should we fix, right, as a potential carbon price, we don't have that as of yet. And just being guided by market forces alone shows us clearly that prices just don't reflect, the realities on the ground, which is why all the more regulation is required.
All right. Thank you so much, Renard. Ladies and gentlemen, give yourselves a round of applause. We're very happy. 4 questions, men and women on both sides. We need to now close, and so we're in the home stretch. So both sides, speakers, this time against the motion, 4 minutes to wrap up the debate. The floor is yours.
All right. I think first up, this debate has been really interesting. It gives us an opportunity to really shape the discourse of how our carbon markets will look like. I think going back to some of the earlier evidences, arguments that I've put forth, it is very clear to me that our carbon markets that are guided by market forces simply do not work. And there were 3 arguments that I put forth in order to support my stand. The first argument was really around the environmental integrity of carbon credits. As I've pointed out and alluded to earlier, we have seen investigative studies by Guardian, Leipzig, Source Material. All of them have alluded that some of the rarest rainforest credits simply are phantom credits. They do not achieve the intended consequences that they were set out to. The Kariba scandal was another one that shocked the whole world. More than 50% of credits that were issued were overstatements or overclaims, and were eventually suspended, those credits. Now, with doubt regulation, we will continue to see a lot of these credits floating around in the market. Which brings me to my second argument, that market forces alone cannot guarantee accountability and transparency. And once again, I think these are two very big keywords that will help shape the course of today's debate. Who takes liability? Who should be held accountable? Who should be held responsible when something goes wrong? Without proper regulation, we simply do not have a response to this. We cannot hold anyone to account. Transparency is very much needed. As some of the conversations that we've had earlier, even in the room, we need to have actually a registry system first and foremost to make sure that only credible projects are registered, right, at our national level, to ensure that the principles of carbon credits, right, are not compromised, that we continue to ensure that credits that are being traded continue to adhere to principles around permanence, no double counting, and that they actually have real co-benefits, right, to some of the communities, and have social benefits to communities that the projects that are involved with. And I guess the third argument that I brought up was really centered around the importance of regulation to restore the confidence of investors. A lot of you here in the room are financiers, from big institutional pension funds, corporations. The dismal signal that we're seeing in BCX, a large part of it is really driven by this lack of confidence. People don't want to buy into something if there's a fear that what they're buying into at the end of the day will be discredited. They're afraid that there will be accusations, allegations of greenwashing, which is very serious for a lot of corporations. And you couple this with the lack, of course, of regulation of corporations not even claiming that they have net zero targets. This really exacerbates the matter quite a fair bit. So with all of these compelling arguments, it is without a shred of doubt that I strongly believe that our carbon markets should be guided by regulation instead of market forces. The climate crisis is the defining issue of our generation. We only have one opportunity to make a difference. So let's not gamble and take a chance, right, on market forces. They simply do not work.
Thank you very much. Tim, 4 minutes. We are on a very hard clock. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So I want to come back to where we started and kind of re-emphasize the importance of getting to the right answer here. We all need to be achieving net zero for our future, our children's future, our grandchildren's future. Even if we do the very best possible job, the next 50 years, the climate is going to be getting worse and worse. So we need to be allocating capital efficiently and to the right places. Carbon credits is the mechanism by which we put grant money, equity money that does not need a return, to work in the right places. And we want that to go to where we can be reducing emissions, but where it's not already economic. And for that to happen, where exactly that is a fast evolving picture. So 5 or 6 years ago, I could put money into renewable energy generation, solar PV, wind, and that will be a good place, and I can calculate the emissions that I've avoided by not using coal-fired power. Today, that's not an efficient use of capital because those sources are already cheaper than fossil fuels, and so the market will solve it. Instead, today we might want that money to go towards the development of a green steel plant, the development of green hydrogen, something which is needed but not yet economic. A regulated carbon credit market will never, ever achieve that. Regulators take too long, and they're too wary of changing their standards to ever be the right way of solving that problem. So that was my first case. I also then made the point that I don't think we should be aiming, and this is, both of us have reinterpreted the motion a little bit here to suit our own cases, but I think it is an important point. We should not view the aim here of creating a new capital market in which we're trading carbon credits. That is just missing the point here. What we're trying to do is we're trying to accelerate decarbonisation. We're trying to move towards a better economic future, and we're trying to avoid the worst effects of climate change. For that, we need responsible buyers in hard-to-abate sectors or where the emissions are several levers beyond their control to be putting grant money in the right place to be reducing emissions. They will do that better if they are held to account for their own targets, if they're setting those targets themselves, if they're reporting it, and if they're doing their own calculations from one year to the next. I put it to you that there are lots of companies that can do that and will do that, and what we need is to not badly intermediate it with the wrong regulation that then directs capital in the wrong direction.
Thank you very much, all. We've got a we've got a very special guest that's just arrived today.
Yes.
So if you'd like to wrap up, Augustine.
So thank you so much, and thank you, Tim, for being so magnanimous, and thank you, Minister, for gracing us on the occasion. Can we just get the House to vote on the last poll, please? So can we get the poll up, and then we will announce the results. Can we have the QR code up, please? Thank you so much, everyone. So, Minister, we just had a debate on the benefits of this. Can we have the vote, please? The vote. Can we go back to the vote, please? Malaysia's carbon market should be guided by market forces instead of regulation. Could we quickly now vote against the motion or for the motion? So how many of you believe that the carbon market in Malaysia should be guided by market forces? That's for the motion. And how many of you believe Malaysia's carbon market should be guided by regulation? That's against the motion. And if we can hit the number, and I seek Minister's permission with this, I'm going to make a private comment as a fellow Liverpool fan minister, so I seek it for just a few seconds more. 70 plus. We have hit the House number, all right? So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a round of applause for the speaker that argued against the motion. Gentlemen, could you please stand? And we will have to exit the stage. And once again, everyone, please join me in thanking both Tim and Reynard for a rousing panel discussion.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.